people in Lagos and around the world.
And I want to welcome Chibuzor Nwaezeapu also to Freshly Pressed.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Omas. Good morning, AB.
And I welcome the listener this morning to be part of the conversation at every point of this conversation to send WhatsApp messages to 0809-444-0981. That said, we're good to go. Let's begin with AB helping us to unpack this first the headline from the Punch newspaper, where it says that the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, that's hunger, the NNPCL, they're no longer a corporation now, joins United Nations Global Compact. That's what Punch is saying. So, AB, what exactly is this new development, and how will it profit Nigeria?
The beauty of this kind of shows is that you get to learn a lot of things that might not otherwise have crossed your desk. With the NNPCL joining this United Nations Global Compact, I had to look it up. What does that mean? How will that change the price of Gary in the market? Well, it might not directly affect Gary. However, what the United Nations Global Compact is like an agreement by companies and other corporations to act in an ethical manner when it comes to matters of labor practices, corruption, and there are 10 primary areas: environmental, sensitivity and all that. And I thought, well, they have just signed on. So I'll just say, maybe we can say a line has been drawn in their past behavior and practices, and we can look forward then to the NNPCL being a more outstanding member of corporate society, and indeed assenting to benchmarks that are measurable on an international basis and standard. I thought it's not a bad thing at all for the NNPCL, especially with item number 8, which is engaging in environmentally sensitive and friendly practices. I think the NNPCL could be a leader in matters that pertain to those situations where we hear that security forces are destroying crude oil with fires and bursting pipes and letting that leak into the environment. What it means, hopefully, is that the NNPCL will hold itself to a higher standard, and other stakeholders can also point to the NNPCL to hold themselves to a higher standard. I think ultimately it can only benefit the operations because it could lead to better business practices. There's nothing as good as, instead of people saying, okay, we take responsibility for being better. When that responsibility starts from self, I think you have a higher tendency to achieve your goals.
Well, if I get what you say now, it's simply submitting oneself to scrutiny internationally for best practices and transparency. That's what it's really all about in summary.
Fundamentally. And, if they have willingly gone ahead to sign it, then they were not pushed kicking and screaming. So hopefully the intention will be there.
This horse the donkey called NNPC willingly got to the river, and it will not be forced. It will drink the water from the agreement.
Drank off the water, precisely. You got it.
Okay. This takes me to the stable of Chibuzor Nwaezeapu this morning, and I'd like him to speak to this one Lagos-related matter. Lagos approves 375 million naira scholarship for indigenes of tertiary education. That's what it's saying. It looks everyone could use some assistance in every areas now, and in this regard, education is where the state government is focusing on. But tell us more about how this would impact the students' quality of education.
So I recall back when I was in university how we used to struggle and scramble for the Delta State bursary then. In fact, that's another story for another day, but let's pack it at that to show how much even students who are being subsidized, whose education is being subsidized, need the additional subventions that come. So there's an entire amount of about 375 million that has been earmarked for scholarship and bursary awards, and the purpose obviously is to support the academic pursuits of Lagos State student indigents. Keyword is indigents. And this was mentioned by the Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Scholarship Board, Mr. Abdulrahman Lekki. He said it's part of the governor's vision to make education accessible, affordable, and sustainable. And this is evident through the timely disbursement of funds. So these funds are broken across the fresh undergraduate, there are scholarships for undergraduate and PhD recipients, there are governor's discretionary awards, there are some for the guys in the law school, and so on and so forth. There's an entire breakdown of who these funds are accessible to.
I see there's also
Sorry?
the mention of people living with disability in this.
Exactly. So yeah, so there is there's actually what I actually like, and that's what you pointed out, is there's an attempt at inclusivity. So you're looking at people with disability and people and the poor and vulnerable. My challenge is how you are going to define who is the poor and who's the vulnerable. And that's typically what the challenges with processes such as scholarships in Nigeria and bursaries. A lot is said about the availability of these items or this amount being earmarked. The next thing is there needs to be some more transparency in how, especially scholarships are disbursed. They need to ease up the processes for accessing the bursaries should be easier, should be clear. You know, in trying to give out the subventions or this assistance to students, we should not take away the dignity of the students. And that's where we are failed as a nation. I think we still move with our traditional mindset and in conflict with how we treat undergraduates or people in higher education, or even our citizens that are vulnerable and need assistance. What needs to happen is that processes for this disbursement needs to be clear to anybody who's going to be able to take it. I should be able to look it up and say, what can I actually get from this fund? What am I eligible for? And I need to be able to apply. And that process is clear to me from start to finish. And, you know, it would go a long way, especially in this time when we talk about the right funding of education. These are the kind of things we need to see a lot more of across board.
This takes me back to AB. AB, do you have a little sprinkling of salt or something to sweeten the story? I mean, don't want to leave it at that.
Basically, anything that will promote the ability for people to access education is one of the most excellent investments you can make in a society. So I completely love the idea. Like Chibuzor said, it should be transparent. Sitting in one location on a smartphone, there should be a checklist of items I need to provide, a checklist of steps I need to take, an expected time frame, and thereafter, perhaps what I should expect to get. So it's really about refining the process, but the idea is excellent.
Let's let the listener know they can be part of our conversation at this moment. Any of the headlines you feel we're treating at this moment, we'd like to get your thoughts on them. So just feel free to send that as a WhatsApp message to 0809-444-0981, 0809-444-0981, your name and location included in the message. AB, I start with you with this paper, and the Daily Trust is what stares at you right now. The headline is saying, International Day of Peace, NUPEC asked President Tinubu to assent to peace bill. That's as the Daily Trust reports this morning. That's when you link that to the fact that 21st every year, September, is celebrated as a commemoration of peace, and then link that to all of the several pockets of fires needed to be, extinguished in Nigeria and of course in the sub-region. Take us through the story.
Now, you could have fooled me if you told me that I knew that the 21st of every year is National Day of Peace. I actually didn't know. And so there's somebody who's called the Commandant General of the National Unity and Peace Corps, another organization unknown to me. I must be the ignorant one because, like you said, around the country, there seems to be, in certain pockets, an absolute absence of peace. We hear too many stories of herdsmen of all sorts and nationalities attacking people. We hear stories of kidnappings. We've heard a recent tragic story of attacks on security people, and then allegedly counterattacks by some security forces on communities, and a variety of things like that. So this person is saying, please, the president should assent to the bill when it's legislated by the National Assembly. I support the notion of peace because the absence of peace is tumultuous. It's not helpful for national development. However, it's not by a certain legislation that there'll be peace. Peace is best found in the bosom of justice. And so while we seek this kind of bill and hopefully get it and hope the president will assent to it, we must make greater efforts to remove the barriers to peace actually emerging organically in society. You know, I think we have a lot of laws, many of them well-intentioned, many of them even well legislated. It's really the application of these laws and how well we can translate the paper to the practice that will determine if or whether peace will emerge on the scene of Nigeria. So it's great. This person is doing, I guess, what he is supposed to do, promote peace as a concept, as part of societal development and all that. Great. He's advocating for justice and equal rights and all those, because those are some of the components. When you find conflicts among people, there is a perceived injustice. If you can address those perceptions and separate them from the realities, I think you can find peace will emerge. It may never be perfect, but there'll be the grounds upon which people can negotiate peaceful coexistence. So let's go ahead with this potential, legislation, but at a granular level within society, among communities, let us actually address what people's perceptions are. And I think with that, you will have the peace we so desperately need, desire, and can profit from.
Chibuzor, I'd like you to stay with this thought before we get into the paper in front of you, but can peace be legislated, or can we arrive at or is peace a destination or a journey, a process? Talk to me about that.
Peace eventually will be a destination. In the process of reaching peace, part of it would have to be legislated, but laws without getting the people who are supposed to enforce the law, live with those laws, involved in setting up those laws is meaningless. You can put forward an unjust law that gets passed by a set of people in a room, and it has no application to people who are on the ground who those laws are supposed to be enforced upon, and you will naturally get resistance. Okay. It's one of the problems, it's one of the challenges with our system of current system of government. The entire idea of having representatives, that the representatives should be close to their people, and when laws are being passed, especially laws that impact their people on a day-to-day basis, they need to engage, they need to have hearings, they need to have sit-ins, they need to be in the community. Unfortunately, what we tend to see in a lot of instances is that once people get to Abuja, get those tickets that fly them to Abuja, they stay, or even within the states, they stay far away from people that have put them there. I have loads of examples where I used to live. They go and they upgrade their housing from the local communities to the GREs, open offices that nobody uses, offices that are paid for within the constitution, within a constitutional remit. The offices are poorly funded. They have the so-called constitutional representative offices that each of them are supposed to set up in their areas. They are poorly funded, poorly staffed. They serve little function. There are a lot of things that are catered for in our democracy in working in practice. That's increasing that linkage with people, and it's not a stipend or a top-down thing where they just come in once in a while, drive to the area and throw cash around.
All right, this takes us, I ask you to chime in the conversation, because there's a link to the headline you're about to break down for us this morning. And this one is from the Vanguard newspaper. And now it's not peace within now, it is peace external now, within the neighbor. And they say fences, if they are good enough or strong, can make for good neighbors. But let's get into the headline. Cameroon-Nigeria boundary dispute. The Chief of Defense Staff assures Reps Committee of Security support. So take us through this story and how we can put an end to this recurring decima of boundary dispute between Nigeria and Cameroon.
Okay, basically, it says very little about the conflict in itself. It talks about the ad hoc committee. The other committee being led by, I think it's Benila, who's met with the CDS, and the CDS has given assurances of security. That first part actually is not news. The CDS should be able to give, by default, we should be able to guarantee safety and security of every citizen of Nigeria within the confines of the Nigerian border. So that first part for me isn't news. But what is interesting for me is that Benila has said that the reason why one of the reasons what has thrown this up is the motion on the floor of the House that talked about the internal displacement of people from the Boki area. I think that's from Cross River, who have been affected by some of the boundary disputes in Cameroon. Now, there's a lot. This takes us back to the story about Nigeria's issues with internally displaced people, and there's typically a lot of mention about what is happening in the south, in the northeast. Nigeria today, I think at the end of July, has about 2.3 or 2.4 million people internally displaced. And if that has the largest number globally at 6.8, we are not so far away. We're about a third of what Syria has. So it's a big challenge. And this, I think it went down from about over 3 million last year. This problem is everywhere we seem to have a border, there are issues around internally displaced people. So there's a direct impact on the people who have had to leave. And the Nigerian-Cameroon border dispute issue is a long-suffering, long-bound issue. I think this kick-started, if I'm not wrong, from the Gowon era, when particular things were signed off and dragged into the General Mohamed Buhari, and how they chose to enforce and moved into the Olusegun Obasanjo era. And we're still dealing with the outcomes of this, because in trying to settle where our artificial border lines between our neighbors in Cameroon are and where in Nigeria today, we are displacing people, because you are telling people who have lived entire generations of their lives, grown up, and tell them that, see, now you have to make a choice. You're no longer connected to Nigeria. We are now ceding this area to Cameroon. Because of you see yourselves as Nigerians, you need to pack your luggage and move away to where you have no preparation for. So in trying to sort out some of these border issues, the government also has a responsibility to ensure that they are taking care of the people of Nigeria.
I think you would also want to, because you mentioned the General Olusegun Obasanjo in it as the president back in the day who was ready to implement that. There was an international court order which the president was enforcing a ruling on that.
Yes, he was. I'm not sure of the details of that order, but I think it mandated basically the ceding of the areas that had gone to Cameroon needed to be handed over to Cameroon, and that led the large displacement of people in that area. Although obviously there are no backs and forths around those issues still today.
Okay, so let's get back to AB. AB, this next story is your line. I don't know if there was a ballot, before we picked up the story and how it's landing in you, but they say related things will find themselves in a way, no matter what happens. So this is the Nation newspaper with a headline going to Ekiti State saying, Ekiti begins operation Show Your Building Plans. AB, you are an architect. Yes, coming to you as a professional in this field, how does it make you feel? Help us break this down and how it intends to make housing safe for people.
Okay. In Ekiti State, the Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development has said they are initiating stringent measures to curb, in their words, the proliferation of illegal construction. And they have started by sealing off 3 non-compliant structures in Ado Ekiti. Let's start from that first paragraph. What is a non-compliant structure? Evidently, that would be a building or structure otherwise that was erected either not meeting the standard, not properly located, not properly functioning, or not properly, constructed. It's an illegal structure. And I always ask the question, so first of all, if any building is, falling under any of those things, of course, it shouldn't be allowed to be utilized for human beings because there are inherent dangers. However, I've always wondered how it always, if you watch a movie, have you noticed that in most movies, after all the things have happened, you always hear the sound of police vehicles coming after the hero has finished sorting out the problems? It is after that the police always come. Now you ask yourself, why were the police not there when all the drama was happening? Obviously, that's how the movies are successful. Similarly, a house or a building cannot be erected in a vacuum or in a hurry. So by the time you come to the point where you have to seal an entire building, where were the authorities when the foundation was being dug? Where were they when the walls were being erected? Where were they when the roof was being put on? Windows, doors, finished, everything. Then it's after the fact, like the police in movies, they come and seal it up. I say there is some negligence on the part of the authorities who allowed a structure actually emerge and then come and seal it. So you have to ask yourself if they're doing the right thing. So going on further, they're saying that there's a reason why they're doing this. They want to make sure that people comply with the regional and urban planning laws enacted in 2011. Good. What are those laws? Are they widely available? Like we talked about in the earlier story, is there a website where a person, whether a professional or an intending owner, can go and study, know what is allowed, where it is allowed, how it should be done, so that you have informed consumers, informed users? Questions. Those are areas that the urban planning authorities neglect to provide information for the public. So last of all, let's be clear. I am certainly an advocate for good planning, and I expect all of our municipalities to also pursue the best practices. But here's something, like my brother always says, there are no selfies in a slum. Have you noticed that there are certain pictures you see, immediately you see the picture, you know that this is taken abroad? Why? Because there are other pictures you see, I know this is somewhere in Nigeria. Clearly, planning has a benefit in terms of the health of people, in terms of how well they can function, in terms of even their access to, let's say there's a fire in certain parts of Lagos or Warri here. A fire engine, if it even existed, cannot access that place. Why? The buildings are too closely spaced. There is all sorts of crap, gutters. Listen, planning is ultimately what we're supposed to be looking forward to in heaven when we get there. We can create heaven on earth. We have seen places that are akin to heaven here on earth. The goal of the Ekiti State government is noble, but I always ask, how did it become so bad under their watch?
All right, thank you.
That is the question.
AB, thank you so much. You could almost, your response and breaking down of this headline is, you could sense the passion. And of course, it speaks as one who is a stakeholder, an architect in the field. So well, thank you for breaking that down. But so let's let the listener know it will be time to get the messages in shortly on 0809-444-0981. Keep the messages coming in. We'll soon pick them up. So Chibuzor, help us break this next story from the Vanguard newspaper. It says, it's more like a reassuring headline. It says, we are working to rescue 8 abducted corps members in Zamfara State. Bring us up to speed with this story and the details in about a minute.
Okay, this is rather unfortunate, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of people still question the use of the NYC. And personally, I do not question it. I think it's something that is useful in Nigeria, still remains useful, but how it's implemented is a different discussion for another day. About, I think, there were 8 prospective corps members who were kidnapped. I believe this was I'm not sure if this was last week or some weeks back. They were on their way to the orientation camp in Sokoto, and they were kidnapped in Zamfara State. Now, I think it's a bit funny that this is coming from the NYC Director General, because last I checked, NYC has very little impact in managing security. Yes, they are the stakeholders, they have responsibility for the corps members, so they should give updates. But I would have liked a joint session where you had reps from the police and security forces giving us an update on what they had done to try and recover this man, what they were going to do going forward to prevent it. And this ties to my previous story about the CDS and the security forces being able to ensure that there's security for every Nigerian within the confines of this or the borders. This story is rather stakeholders, including the traditional rulers, the typical traditional rulers, the state government, everybody and anyone that they think can help. Apart from consulting, we have not seen a clear line of action, and every day where these guys are in captivity counts. Unfortunately, this serves as a further disincentive for most parents to allow the release of their wards, or even most wards to get on those journeys where they are posted from one part of the country to another extreme part of the country. I recall when I was serving, I was happy to jump on the bus from Lagos, spend the night in Benin, go via night bus from Onitsha, and end up in Jalingo, Taraba State in the middle of the night, where I was lucky. I was one of the people that knew somebody, but I had a lot of my friends that knew nobody, and we felt safe. And this is not so long ago. Now, I would not send any of my, I would flinch. It would be hard, I'll be hard pressed to send any of my family members on that journey today. Because I would not be able to sleep throughout that journey. And that's where the situation we found ourselves in Nigeria today. And we need to reverse the situation. We need to solve those problems. And those problems itself are multifaceted. So we pray and we hope for the safe return of these young people who are supposed to contribute to the future of this country. Hopefully we'll be tracking this story and hoping for good news to come out of it.
Thank you very much for speaking passionately about the sanctity of human life, as well as the life of core members in service to fatherland. Looks like a fine place to pick up a few messages and then get down to AB to close the show up with a final story. If Austin's message comes in on time, we'll pick it up. But let's see. Ayo says, responding to Chibuzor and AB, about legislating peace. It is easy to make laws, but enforcement is the issue. The irony is, how do you enforce peace? Like says, when it is enforced, then it is not acceptable. They say there is no peace without justice. I think patience should be added. Peace is readily available with patient people. My fear is Nigerians are becoming more impatient. That's Ayo's message for us this morning. And then from Apapa comes Emeka Ndukwe saying, my interest is in the indigenous, that's responding to the scholarship now, indigenous. Who are indigenous Lagosians? Even the governor, it says, goes on, but you can substantiate that. So, but it goes, please, they should open it up. That's a scholarship to Lagosians who are residents in Lagos and can present relevant documents as the school to support their claim. Thanks, Emeka Ndukwe sent in that one. I've got a message. This one comes in. The NYC has outlived its usefulness. In the face of the daunting security challenges across the nation, the best option is to scrap the NYC. Barrister Dan Okuda from Igondo. I believe you had your small alawi. Probably you were back in the days, received those who collected 5K. Some of us had 9K, right? Some are collecting 33K as we speak now. Who knows, they might get to 50, but let's see how we can get to this next message here. The next one from Emeka Bagada saying, you only support NYC, but will not send his loved one to certain locations. And that he mentioned it also in terms because of the security situation. That's Chibuzor's response now. James from Asaba says, why is our military run like a local street gang? Killing of army officers in Imo by unknown persons is bad and condemnable. However, the irresponsible reaction of the army by attacking civilians and their businesses is very sickening. That's the last message we can take this morning as we, maybe, it was more of an environmental story, and I know with your passion, it's related to the government. They're saying clogged drains in Lagos to get attention. That's from the Nation newspaper. If you sum it up for us in less than a minute, we do it.
Yeah, basically, it's just like what we're talking about. People being responsible for refuse. We've had a chat about this before. Yes, people must be responsible, but the government has a larger responsibility to the collective. So they are talking about solutions to flooding. Let's make sure canals are properly maintained. I think part of the reason why we have this challenge with canals is that right now, canals are almost a throwaway space. In some other parts of the world, I think in Amsterdam or Rotterdam, where they are also underwater, canals are a part of the landscape. And so everybody has a sense of stakeholder engagement with them. You have walkways along the side, people hang out there. So if you decide to upgrade the designs and implementation of our canals, maybe people will stop seeing them as backyard things, and instead will now make them part of the landscape and beauty, potential beauty of Lagos. I call Lagos potentially the Venice of Nigeria. It could actually be so much more beautiful if we incorporate all the water bodies we have in Lagos into the landscape.
Thank you very much, AB Bozimo, for your time this morning on Freshly Pressed. We appreciate you.
Thank you. The pleasure and privilege are always mine. Have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you. And to Chibuzor Nwaezeapu, thank you as always. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Marsha. It's been great spending this time here with yourself and AB and Lagos. Our listeners.
Bye.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1 FM. My name is Omatseye Atsenuwa. Good morning.